Yeah, so I mean, if you look at the trends, you see that that type of fraud is growing. So, this fraud is not something new. For the past few years, we've always known that passwords are not good enough to protect the digital life. It's subject to phishing, social engineering, cracking, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of companies have introduced the concept of sending an SMS as a second layer of security. And they've done so using a little PIN code that is to be introduced into the digital channel. And by doing that, they've introduced also this new fraud. This fraud has been around for a few years, SIM swap fraud, where the fraudster basically convinces a mobile operator to move the phone number of the victim onto a new SIM card. And when that happens, they have access to your digital identity. They receive the SMS, they receive the PIN code, and from that point, they're able to either access your email, or they're able to connect to your social media account, or they're also able to basically take money out of your account. We've seen that fraud for the past few years. It's really started hitting the world in the UK and other places like that. We've seen it in Nigeria for the past couple of years. We've seen it in Kenya. Kenya, really, we've started talking about it for the past 6 months, but we know that issue has been there for a little while. And we're seeing also that this issue is growing. So if you look at South Africa, for example, the number of SIM swap fraud has doubled since last year.
Right.
If you look at Nigeria, that fraud is big enough that the government is putting a mandate to fix that issue. It's the same thing in Australia, where that fraud seems to be doubling on an annual basis.
Right. So, you see, what we understand is that indeed you're saying that this is a growing trend. And of course, it's not just affecting Africa alone. But the worry is that we have seen different countries putting up measures as far as SIM registration is concerned, where you're required to actually come with your identity card, and there's some procedures that you need to actually go through. So why is it that it's becoming difficult to curb this, regardless or despite the fact that we have these security measures in place already?
If you want to be very strict in terms of implementing the measures to do a SIM swap, then it becomes extremely complex. It's measures that are very cumbersome to implement, and they're very cumbersome for the user to actually do a legitimate SIM swap. So we see some mobile network operators ask you to go to a branch, which is not really a good reality in the market, where people don't go to branches anymore. Or they implement biometrics, which are very cumbersome as well. And there are also measures that are sometimes bypassed within the system. So it's quite a complex thing to put in place. We're talking to mobile network operators around the world, and they have yet to find a solution that's easy for the user that wants to do a SIM swap, but at the same time make sure and prevent fraud.
Right. We have heard of cases where we have people who have actually lost about $200,000. One person is actually being quoted by some of the media outlets that he did actually lose $200,000 in cryptocurrency in a SIM swap attack. So if one person can actually lose this, what sort of economic impact do you see as far as losses are concerned when it comes to the economy due to the SIM swap fraud across Africa, for example?
It's very difficult to quantify. We've asked that question in Kenya. We've asked that question to the banks, and they've told us that it's millions of dollars that are being lost in the system. But when you talk to banks, and they don't like to talk about fraud, they don't like to talk about their problems, so it's very difficult to quantify. But you gave the example of someone that lost $200,000. And there are actually a good example right now where someone in the US has lost $20 million of cryptocurrency, and is suing AT&T for allowing the SIM swap to occur without his consent. So we know it's a big issue. It's very difficult to quantify, but just small examples out there can show you really how big that issue is.
Right. So which way forward? Which way forward now? Where do we go from here? Now, this is an issue we all know about. We're saying that it's not a concern just for Africa. So where do we go from here?
I think there's a couple of things that, couple of steps that people are taking to fix that problem. In Europe, typically what we see is the banks take an approach to use a different second authentication mechanism. So instead of relying on one-time password or SMS, they rely on mobile apps and authentication methods that are available on smartphones. But you know, that's not the reality of the market anywhere in the world. First, not everybody has access to a smartphone. Not everybody has access to data, even if they have a smartphone. And not everybody download apps. You know, if you look at places like the UK, the mobile app penetration for mobile banking is really peaking at 60%, which means that 40% of people are not protected. So we've taken a different approach with Myriad Connect, and the approach we're doing is to help mobile network operators expose the intelligence that they have in the network to prevent fraud. And we're providing that information to the banks so that should a SIM swap occur, the bank knows about it straight away, and then they can take extra measures to make sure that the transaction is protected. And we believe that's the way forward. We're talking to mobile network operators across Africa because we really believe that that's where we should start our efforts. We've launched in Kenya, we're available in Uganda, we're looking at Nigeria right now, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, South Africa, and basically that intelligence is available somewhere. We just need to find a way to expose it in order to continue to allow transactions.
Right. It would be unfair to end this conversation without having or giving someone watching us an opportunity to know the 3 things, for example, or even just 2, of how to avoid becoming a victim of a SIM swap attack. What are those 3 things? Sure.
Well, so from a user perspective, I think several things. First, make sure you have a very strong password. You know, we see that out there. People continue to have silly passwords like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You know that you really do need to have a strong password. Don't rely on one-time password or SMS to be this extra layer of security, because it's not. So you know, first thing, make sure you have a strong password. Second thing, limit the personal info that you have online. Because that personal information is used by the hackers to know about you, and then to convince the operator to move your line to another SIM card. So, you know, safe measure and limit that. And learn to symptoms of SIM swap. So basically what would happen if your SIM has been swapped is suddenly your mobile phone is not connected anymore. Your line is not active. And if that's the case, it means that something has gone wrong. So I would strongly advise to call the mobile network operator. It's probably not too late. And then to call your financial institution to make sure that nothing wrong has happened.